Okay, so today what we're going to look at is we're going to be solving matrix equations. So obviously an equation, we can have like addition, or we can have subtraction, we can have multiplication, and then we could also have where we could have division. Now, just to remember, we don't have division in matrices, and what we do is we times by the inverse. So I'm just going to write it like that, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to be given like equations with matrices, and there's going to be one that you don't know, and it's called like the unknown one. So here I've set up a few examples of what of some equations. So for example here, the one that's in the red, the X, is going to be a matrix that you don't know what it is, and they want you to find it. So what they've told you is you know what matrix A is, and you know if you add X to it, it'll equal matrix B. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing, you do the same as when you were solving basic equations. So remember when you have basic solving of equations is, remember, you do opposite operations, yeah? So we do opposite operations. So what that means is if something is adding on one side of the equal, so if we've got an equals, if we're adding it on one side, if you move it over, it'll do the opposite, which is subtracting. And the same thing if you're multiplying something on one side and you move it over the equal sign, you're going to do the opposite, which is division, but for us it's going to be multiplying by the inverse because we don't have dividing as such. All right, so let's have a look. So this first one up here, so if we had A plus X equals B, so remember the X one is the one you don't know. So what you would essentially want to do is you want to move the A over the other side of the equals. So because at that it's adding on the left hand side, so you can see when I moved it over, it was subtracting. Okay, so if we had over here and we had X minus A, so obviously with this second one equaled B, we'd want to move that minus, we want to move this minus A over the equal sign. So therefore it does the opposite, which is plus A. Okay, now if you have a look here, this next one, when we have this little n in front of the unknown, that's what we're saying, that's a scalar number. So that's an actual number. So if you want to just write scalar there, it's a scalar and it's actual number. So if you want to move that over the other side, you're not moving a matrix, you're moving a number, you will divide. So divide, we can just say 1 over n. Or you could, the matrix A divided by. So you're pretty much going to, that's another scalar number. You're just going to multiply that matrix out by the fraction, the 1 over n. Okay, so now the next one down here, you need to take note that this one's timesing. So what we've got A times X equals B. Now we don't know what X is, so we're going to move the A. So the A is timesing, so if I move it over an equal sign, it's going to do the opposite, which is not dividing, it's timesing by the inverse. Now remember the other day I said that matrix order is very important. Because the A is multiplying at the front, when you move it over and you use the inverse, that A must remain at the front of that other matrix. And you can see in the second example, when the A came after the unknown, we want to move it over, so it has to be multiplied after. So you've got to be just really careful with that, okay? So order with the multiplication is really important. If it's at the front, if you're timesing at the front of your unknown, that means you're timesing the inverse at the front of the one you do know. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice some of these. So they've given me some examples of some matrices, and they are obviously saying let's solve for X. So what we're saying is this one, every time in the scenario, the x is the unknown. And you can see we don't have x up there in our list of matrices. So what I want you to do with these questions like these, don't write out the matrix as such. Just use the letters and first find out what you would need to do to solve it. So because we're going to move this plus b over an equal sign, what is it going to do? What do we need to do? What's the opposite to adding or plussing? Minusing. So we're going to have matrix C and we're going to minus B. So what you can do is you just type that out, and obviously this bit is what we pop in the calculator, and you can see down here I've actually put that. So this was this was matrix C and minus matrix B. Okay, and that was, it's pretty, you could have done that one in your head, but here's your answer. So we'll just pop that in and we'll just write, this is our answer. So 6, -2, 1 and 4. So in this example, that's what x equals. So yeah, you can just use your calculator or you can do it in your head for that one. Okay, so if we look at this next one here, we want to move this b over an equal sign. So we can see what the operation is actually multiplying there. So, like on our little summary sheet on the page before, we want to do the opposite to timesing, which is timesing by the inverse. So, because b is at the front, I need the inverse at the front. So this is what I'm going to type. The b to the power of -1 times matrix C. So you can see down here, I've done that. I typed in matrix b to the power of -1 and I timesed it by C. And, and then I found out what x equals. So I've done it down there on the calculator and we get 12, -8, -16, 15. Okay, so let's do this last one. So with this last one, we can see that the b is multiplying there against the x. So we're going to use the inverse. But in this instant, because b was getting multiplied after the x, that means when we're working it out, we're going to, the inverse will be multiplied after the matrix that we're being given. So you can see down here, I've done matrix C on the calculator times the inverse of B, and I end up with my answer of X, which is there. So I'm just going to write that down, 19, -10, -10, and 8. Okay. Okay, so we've got a few more, so I'm just going to do a couple more. So here we can see, so remember they're saying that x is the unknown. So this is the one we're trying to find. This is the one we don't know. So often, you know, in a worded scenario or in an exam or in a SAC, they're not exactly going to say these are, you know, they're not going to list the matrices up there like that. It'll probably be in a scenario. So what you can often do is you probably know they might write this equation out and you can just go along and go, oh yeah, they've given me B. I know what B is and I also know what D is. So then you're right, okay, I know how to work this out. What I need to do, so with this one, that B is multiplying, and because it's multiplying, that means I'm going to use the inverse, but because it's at the front, it needs to be, the inverse needs to be at the front in your working out. So that will be our answer, and you can see down here on the calc I've done B -1 times D. So we end up with X equaling 1 and 0. Okay. All right, in the next one, it's still the same thing. So we're, you know, you can just give this a go later on. So A is in the front. So when I use the inverse, I have to put it in the front, and I'm going to times it by E. So down here, you can see I've done that. This is A to the inverse times E. Okay, so A was a bigger matrix, so that would take a long time, and you don't know how to find the inverse of a 3 by 3. You only know how to manually find an inverse of a 2 by 2. So this one would 100% be all showing on the calculator. And so you can see that I did that one, and we got that answer, and we got a 3 by 1. And there's our answer. Now, with this last one, you want to be really careful. You have to think about what was done first and then what was done last. And the last thing done in the equation is the first thing you move. So if you think about it, up here, I would say B got timesed with X, then we added 4 over 5. So what was the first thing I said, the last thing I said then to what I did? I added 4 over 5. So what that means is that's the first thing that you'll have to move. So just to show you, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the B there. We're leaving these two here. And what I'm going to do is I've got the D there. Oops, sorry. And now I've moved this one first. So I've got minus 4 over 5. Okay, that matrix. Now that works because D is also a 2 by 1. Okay, then what would you do is then the next thing is now I want to keep on moving, and I'd want to move this B. Now this B is multiplying, so what do I need to do if I move that on the other side? It's going to what? Inverse, multiply by the inverse. Will it be at the front or the end? It's at the front. So essentially what will happen is this would give you an answer. But what I like to do is I like to keep it all in one go, like so I can just type it all out in the calculator. So I'm just going to put that in brackets, and then what I'm going to do, because I want the calculator to do that first, and then I would want it to times it by the inverse. So I've got inverse B at the front, and then it's going to times by that, whatever that, the D minus this. So if you put it exactly like this, then the calculator is going to do. Now, why I'm telling you to do this, because then on your calculator, you're going to see everything that you've done. And if you've made, and it'll be easier to spot if you've made an error, because you can actually see what you were actually doing. So you can see down here, here is the B with the inverse, and you can see I've put these brackets there, and here's the D matrix, and the one that they gave us. So once you do all that, you end up with -2 and 2. So with these ones with multiple steps, be very careful. So you need to think about what I just did then. So I took the left-hand side of the equation, and we're trying to get X. So talk it out in your head. Right, B is multiplied with X, then you're adding that. So if you just said you're adding that, that's the first thing, that's the last thing you said, that's the first thing you move, all right? So be careful just with those ones. That will be at the high end when they start getting you to rearrange a bit of equations with a few steps. That would be the top end questions, okay? But they're not hard.